Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pen Habit. I am, of course, Matt Armstrong. Thank you so much for joining. Good to have you back for another review, and this review is going to be a fun one. I like this pen a whole bunch. So the pen in question is the Bexley Equipoise. Want to start off by saying a huge thank you to Van Ness Pens. You can find them at vanness1938.com. They provided this pen free of charge for review purposes. And they're pretty much the only place where you can get this pen in this configuration anymore. And I'll talk a little bit about that right now, actually. So the Bexley Pen Company is a pen company founded in 1993 by a small group of vintage pen collectors who wanted to take kind of vintage designs and styles and merge them with modern materials and manufacturing techniques. So they're based in Columbus, Ohio, and kind of led by a gentleman by the name of Howard Levy. Bexley has been around. They're still making pens today, but they've changed a little bit over time. So in addition to their own pens, many of which were limited edition to start off with, they made pens for collectors and for other collectors or for other retailers around the country. So they did a lot of private label stuff as well. The Equipoise is named after a Wall Eversharp pen called the Equipoised, EQUI-POISED. It doesn't really look anything like that pen, but that's where the name came from. And it was first introduced in 1996 as their first open edition pen, meaning that it wasn't limited, it wasn't special edition, it was an open edition. Came in 3 colors initially. This dark blue color, which is known as Empire Blue, which comes with this green, kind of tealish green color stripe in the design. They had a pen of that green color with a blue stripe called Colorado Green, and then a very interesting color, one I have never seen the like of in the pen world. It looks like a butterscotch candy, like a Werther's Original. That kind of butterscotchy, yellowy, browny sand color that is really kind of cool. They call that Sierra Sand, and that also came with a blue disc of acrylic in there as well. And then with both the Colorado Green and the Sierra Sand have gold hardware. The Empire Blue comes with the silver hardware. Now, I was talking with Lisa Van Ness at the LA show in 2016, and she was telling me a little bit about the history of their interaction with Bexley. So in the mid-2000s, there was a collector in Arkansas, which is where Van Ness is located, who was a fixture of pen shows named Jim Gaston. And as his health started failing, he decided to sell a lot of his collection to the Van Nesses, including a huge cache of Bexley pens. Jim also had a lot of gold nibs, and Jim liked he liked big, juicy broads and stubs, and so there were a lot of broads and stubs and gold nibs. A few years ago, Lisa was telling me that Bexley has kind of gotten away from even handling gold nibs anymore, so most of their nibs are steel. So it's getting more and more difficult to find gold nibs, and they have a whole bunch of them in stock from when they bought this collection from Jim, who sadly passed away last year. So this is one of the Bexleys that they purchased from him. This is part of the Bexley Equipoise line. One other thing I should mention is the early editions of this in 1996 were button fillers. Later editions were cartridge converter fillers. So this is an international standard cartridge converter filled pen. They also did some limited editions or special editions in different materials, but there were only 3 of the open edition. So let me walk you through the pen. Do the standard stuff we do in this review, and then we'll talk about how it writes. And because this pen came to me from Arkansas, let me just preface that once again by saying, y'all. Okay, here we go. The Equipoise. It is a very classic design, kind of cylindrical design with a bigger finial that comes to a very blunted taper, or a taper point up here. You've got a metal ring and then a ring of contrasting color. This is the Colorado green color. You've got a folded metal clip here. It's springy but solid. It attaches internally to the pen, so it's not connected to these rings, directly. The rest of the cap is cylindrical, very nicely polished material, and then it says Bexley here on the cap band, and you've got this kind of geometric design that runs around the rest of the cap band. The pen barrel flares ever so slightly right here, or it appears to flare ever so slightly. We've got another one of the Colorado green acrylic bands and another metal band, and then a finial with a point on it to kind of match the finial at the top of the pen. Now this, as I mentioned, is kind of a very classic design. I got to admit, it doesn't do a lot for me aesthetically. It's very understated. It's very clean lined, and that's nice. The color, the blue and green color, feels, to be frank, very mid-1990s to me, which is when these were originally manufactured. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just perhaps not my style. But because it is so understated, I'm very, very, very willing to look past, the color combination, because these color rings are so minor. Under the cap comes off with 1 3/4 of a turn. You've got very smooth, tight threads, some of the tightest threads I've ever seen on an acrylic pen. My only complaint with the threads are occasionally they don't like to mesh quite right when I'm closing the pen. They are so tight, sometimes they don't mesh quite the way they ought to, so you have to back it up a little bit and just get it to, try to mesh in the right spot. But once you do, they're very, very tight, which is nice. The section is a pretty standard shaped section, slight taper with a flare on the end. And as I mentioned, this is a cartridge converter pen, so it can accept converters and long and short standard international cartridges. You'll also notice that the tenon, which also has very tight, smooth threads, is made of acrylic, and so is the barrel. So this, in theory, could be eyedroppered. I haven't tried it. My only concern would be I don't know how these pieces are attached. So depending on how they're attached, or if they are not attached with an airtight seal, it could leak from back here. So I would just recommend if you're going to eyedropper it, make it a desk pen for a couple days just to make sure it's okay before you do so. The other interesting thing about this material, it's a solid color pen, a solid color material, but you'll notice there's actually a little bit of translucence to the material. You can't see it until you take the cap off. Like, this is the only place I can really notice that translucence, but it's not as solid as it would appear to be right on the surface. Then we come to the nib. Now, I think this is just a beautiful nib. This is an 18-karat gold nib. This is a broad. It's got the Bexley logo in gold, and then everything else is rhodium-plated gold. It is perfectly aligned, very, very lovely ground, kind of standard plastic feed. And this feed makes me believe, the shape of this feed makes me believe this is a Bach nib. This matches the feed style I've seen on other pens that I know are from Bach, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is a nib from Bach. Really, really, really nice nib. So I'll show you that when we get to the writing sample. Let's do a few comparisons. I can show you how this pen stacks up to the competition. So here is a Montblanc 149. You'll notice it's not a tiny pen, but it's not quite as thick as the Montblanc. Here is the Pelikan M1000 and the Pelikan M800 for comparison's sake. And then if you're looking at comparisons with some less expensive pens, the TWSBI All-Star, the TWSBI All-Star. No wonder that didn't sound right. The Lamy All-Star, the TWSBI Eco, and the Pilot Metropolitan for size comparisons. So really not dissimilar in size to the All-Star. a lot more comfortable in the hand for me because it doesn't have that triangular section, but that's another story. Then in terms of measurements, you're looking at 145 millimeters when capped, so it's a good-sized pen. It's 123 uncapped, which starts to get a little bit toward the short side for me. Another couple millimeters, and this would start to feel a little unwieldy, but it's so comfortable in the hand. This is a really beautifully ergonomically designed pen. Now, I've complained about this a lot. It does have a fairly short section, but these threads are so shallow and so smooth that I hardly even notice they are there if I have to hold them. The pen can be posted. It does not post deeply, and it becomes very unwieldy at 179 or 0.7 millimeters, 179.7 millimeters. So a little baseball batty in that particular case. You've got a section, middle of the section, you're looking at 10.6 millimeters. Middle of the barrel is 12.9 millimeters. And then right around the cap band here, you're looking at 15.3 millimeters. And this is a middleweight pen. It's not too heavy, it's not too light. So uncapped, you're looking at 17 grams. If you post it, you're looking at 27 grams. So kind of right in the middle range. I will say posted, even though it's too long for me, it is pretty balanced because the cap is light. It's, just acrylic. So now comes the moment we've all been waiting for. I took this with me to the local Seattle-ish pen posse meetup, and Seattle-ish because we're really on the east side of Seattle, not Seattle proper. And we meet once a month, and we pass our pens around and get to know each other's pens and play with inks, and it's a good time, 2.5 hours sitting in Starbucks driving everybody crazy, having people walk by and look, oh, you guys, are you selling pens? Or yeah, it's our way to share the hobby and with each other and with other people, and it's a lot of fun. So if you have a pen posse in your area and you haven't gone, you should go. And if you don't have one, you should start one, because chances are there's some people in your area who want to come along too. In any case, I took this with me. Now, as I mentioned, aesthetically, this is not the most intriguing of pens. It's very understated, very plain. I'm going to now reenact for you what happened every single time someone picked up this pen. So here's the paper. I hand them the pen. They go, "Are you kidding me?" It writes that well. This nib is something else. And I'm not just saying that. This is one of the most amazing nibs I have ever used. So let me go ahead and do the writing sample, show you how it writes, show you why I am so enamored with this nib, and why it's not quite perfect, but real close. So here is the Bexley Equipoise, and this is the Empire Blue model. The ink is, we are using an 18 karat gold broad nib. And the ink is a new discovery of mine, one that I'm actually finding I like a lot. Quizzy Maroon number 2. Also, not coincidentally, from Van Ness Pens. I figured since I'm doing a pen that they gave me for review purposes, I'd throw an ink in there that I got from them as well. This is a really cool ink. If you're looking for an ink that looks like blood and darkens when it dries like blood does with that little bit of brown, this is a cool ink. I like this one a lot. I'll be doing a full review of this ink at some point in the future, I'm sure. So here is your quote.
I have a personal connection, well, not a personal connection. I have a connection to James Thurber. I don't know a lot of his work, but I do like what I do know. On my personal channel, if you do a search for the user Dr. Chumley, which is my YouTube channel where I do my music stuff, singing and playing the piano and the like, there's a song called Some Days. It was a song written by I believe it was the piano player, the music director for the musical Ragtime, using the words of a James Thurber poem. It was initially sung by Audra McDonald, who is a Broadway. If you don't know her, she's a very, very talented Broadway actress, multiple Tony Award winning. She's been on a couple television series. She's amazing. But I did a version of that song too, and I just love it. Okay, but the nib is why we're here. Now this nib, in the Matt Armstrong scale of nib feedback, where 1 is a, butter on hot glass and 10 is writing on coarse sandpaper, this is a 1.5. This nib is uber smooth. It is uber smooth, which is why someone would do half a downstroke on a letter, look up at me and go, "Are you kidding me?" It is also really wet. It is just a juicy, juicy nib. I like it a whole bunch. It's not perfect though. So you'll notice here the downstrokes are a little bit wider than the cross strokes. So this is a very broad, kind of stubbish broad grind. They also have a stub that is even more stubbish, but yeah, this is it's a pretty broad nib. It also has a real nice bounce to it. It's not flexy at all, but it does have a nice bounce. Get some good bounce going on there. Just glides across the paper. Now, here's where the downside comes in. With nibs that are uber smooth, sometimes on certain papers, they are almost too smooth and you can't get the ink going. And I've run into that a few times, mostly on Rhodia paper. On Tomoe River, it's fine. On anything else, it's fine. But on Rhodia paper and Clairefontaine paper, for some reason, this nib just sometimes has a little bit of a hard start. I've checked it. It's not baby's bottom. This nib is perfectly ground and beautifully smoothed. It's just, it's very sensitive on those two papers. I will also say that it is very sensitive to rolling. This nib does have a pretty definite sweet spot. So if, like me, you tend to roll your pens, you might get some hard starting like that, but all you have to do is just make sure that you've got the nib right on the paper. And I think a lot of that comes from this kind of stubbish quality to the nib. If this were just a little bit rounder, I don't think the sweet spot would be quite as definite. Now this is something I could fix easily, but I'm afraid to because I love the feel of this nib so much. This is a nib I like enough that I'm going to change the way I write to use it rather than change the nib to the way I write. It's just so spectacular. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot more to say about it. Here's the reverse writing. Also very smooth, a little bit more feedback, but not scratchy. Finer line, drier ink flow. But yeah, it's this is a real. See, I had it turned there, so really beautiful nib. Now you can get it with either a steel or a gold nib. If you want the steel nib, this is $125. Now I know some of you are saying that's not affordable. I understand, but for a small manufacturer, small American manufacturer with a steel nib, that's actually not a bad price at all. You can get pens cheaper, certainly, but in terms of workmanship and quality, I don't think you're going to get one that's a lot better at that price. That being said, I would highly recommend you spend the extra and get the gold nib. I've never used a Bexley steel nib, so I don't know how good their steel nibs are. If they're anywhere near as good as the gold nibs are, great. But considering that the gold nibs are getting harder and harder to find, and that these gold nibs are so good, I would, if you're going to get one of these, I would highly recommend getting the gold nib. Now, it is my understanding gold nibs are available in both 14 and 18K. Most sizes, I think, but you're going to have a whole lot more of the broads and the stubs available than anything else. Now, on the Van Ness website, vanness1938.com, they only have the steel nibs listed. So if you want one of these with gold nibs, you're going to need to reach out to them via email or phone call. But I would really highly recommend it. Head over there. The link to these pens will be in the blog post on penhabit.com. So you can see the colors and see what they look like. But if you're going to get one of these, I would really recommend getting the gold nib because holy schmoly, are they good. Okay, so that has been my review / gush over the Bexley Equipoise. The pen, it's fine. It's really well made. It's just not visually not my thing. But the nib, I got nothing else to say. So, thank you once again to Van Ness Pen Company for providing the pen for this review. I really do appreciate it. I am going to treasure this one because the nib on this thing is just something else. And so thank you again. And if you do order from them, please let them know that you found them through the Pen Habit. Thank them for the support of the Pen Habit. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you have any other questions, leave them down in the comments section below on YouTube or over on penhabit.com. Find me on all the social media stuffs. Head over to penhabit.com to check out the Pen Habit store for the currently inked log, and other paper products are going to be coming soon, as well as pens that I am selling from my personal collection. And I think that should do it. That's all the provisos and announcements and things, etc. So thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And we will see you here next time on The Pen Habit. Bye.